What's up, everybody, and welcome into the H&M Trucking Podcast. I am your host, Marcus. Thank you so much for being here. They also know me as the man in the white hat. And if you're not watching this on YouTube, I'm sorry. That reference makes no sense. But it is just a shout out to my amazing custom H&M hat. And I hear that there's going to be some sort of merch giveaway in the future. So maybe stay tuned to your company channels there at H&M to figure out how you can get your hands on some sweet podcast merch. So I guess it's time to get into it today. Oh, no, it's not. I almost didn't do my job very well. First and foremost this week is when we're going to welcome the new drivers to the squad. And of course, Sherry Vogler has sent me over those names. Now, I have to apologize to Sherry because I've been saying Sherry Vogler, and that is 100% wrong. So Sherry, I know you're listening. I really do apologize. You've been a great help to the podcast. We love having you on board to help the team. Please forgive me for mispronouncing your names, I don't know, 10, 15 times at this point. I really sincerely apologize for that. And thank you for putting up with me. Let's get on to it. Who's coming on to the team? Well, how about a big H&M welcome for Michael Morphew? He's a hopper OTR driver. Welcome aboard, Michael. Also, a big shout out to Philip Tutton. He's a van OTR driver. And last but certainly not least on this week's list, we've got Gilbert Castro, who's driving hopper OTR. Welcome, Gilbert. And if any of you new drivers that I've been welcoming each week for the last few weeks are interested in coming on the podcast, your quickest way to do that is to get a hold of Sherry or Eve over at the office. They'll shoot me an email, and bingo, bango, bongo, I'll be in touch with you sometime in the near distant future. So if you're out there listening right now and you're a new H&M driver, welcome to the squad. Happy to have you. Definitely be safe out there. As James Fonda himself has said on this very podcast, don't try too hard. And keep the shiny side up. And we would love to talk to you on the podcast if it's something you're interested in. So make sure you get in touch with Sherry or Eve. What are we talking about today? Because we just spent like the first 3 minutes of this thing not even talking about the actual content of this episode. But we are going to do a little bit of a dive into the state of brokerages in 2024. And what does that mean? Well, here across the last few weeks, we've been talking to drivers on this podcast about some hot button issues. We've talked parking. We've talked AI trucks or autonomous trucks. We've talked electric trucks. And these are all big changes on the horizon. We've talked speed limiter legislation, which sounds like it's not going to be a thing. But on the riding the wave, I guess I will say, of these like hot button topics, one of the things I noticed was that the drivers a lot of the times are talking about one of their issues being delay at shippers and receivers. And from that conversation came that a lot of times H&M's customers that they have and they operate for all the time are Johnny on the spot when it comes to their arrivals and departures as far as shipping and receiving is concerned. They get you in, they get you out, they get you back on the road so you can churn up some miles and make some money. However, sometimes the brokered loads don't always fit that bill. And that's what we're going to talk about today. Coming up around the corner, I've got retired H&M driver Denny Stone. He's been jumping on the pod with me the last couple of weeks. I've really enjoyed having him around. We're going to jump on with him and our good buddy Tim Krueger from JFL Logistics to talk about exactly how JFL approaches these brokered loads and how they try to circumvent some of the problems that arise with brokered loads. And on top of that, we're also going to talk to H&M drivers Joe Bargonetti and Zach Beckman to hear about what they have to say about delays and shipping and receiving and brokered loads. Now, I'm not going to do too much foreshadowing here, but let's just say that Joe and Zach are eager to share their thoughts. It's H&M Trucking Podcast. You're tuned in. You're exactly where you should be. Hit that subscribe button. It really helps us out. And know that we're going to pump out a new one of these puppies every single Wednesday at 5 a.m. for you to put in your ear holes. I don't have anything else to say in this intro. Let's get to the good stuff.
From Omaha, Nebraska, to whatever lane you're driving. This is the H&M Trucking Podcast with your host, Marcus Bridges.
Next up here on the H&M Trucking Podcast, as we discuss the state of brokerages in 2024, I've got driver Joe Bargonetti with me. Joe, welcome back.
Thank you. Thank you, Marcus.
And pretty exciting stuff here because we've also got a driver that you recruited some 6 years ago joining us on the air right now. It's Zach Beckman. Zach, thank you for being here again.
Hello.
So, Joe, you recruited Zach back when he first started at H&M.
Yeah, I met him at Blue Beacon. He was working for Warner, getting a washout on one of his trailers, and about had enough and tried out H&M and came to work for us. Has been here ever since and loves it.
So you had your belly full of Werner, Zach. I can't say I'm all surprised at that.
No, working for Warner, everybody's got to start somewhere. Don't get me wrong, but Warner was starting to gradually take a bit of a downhill turn about the time that I stumbled across Joe, and Joe gave me a heads up to come over here, and I'll admit I did kind of drag my feet about it, but I haven't regretted it since getting here.
Awesome. Well, if I know anything about Joe, the man speaks the truth. That's what I know about Joe. So I'm glad to have you here. Glad to have you both on the podcast. And I just want to get right into this today because, over the last few weeks, I've been talking to a lot of drivers, as always, and we've been talking about hot button issues, things that are ripe for discussion in the industry. And I kept coming across one of these problems that just kept resurfacing. And it seemed like every problem that we talked about, whether it be parking or whether it be, hours of service or anything like that, one thing kept coming up, and it was delay at shippers and receivers. And so I started to look into it a little bit. And what I found was a lot of the delays that you guys experience seem to come with brokered loads. And I just wanted to chat with you guys about some of the problems that you deal with, because we're going to have Tim Krueger from JFL Logistics on the show a little bit later, and we're going to hash out a lot of these things with him. So, Joe, I'm going to start with you. What are your thoughts on brokered loads? What are some of the challenges that you face when you're hauling brokered loads, and just what are your general thoughts about them?
Well, the first thing with the broker load is, what's the truth and what's not? What a broker load is a broker is a company that's trying to make money from scheduling loads from a shipper and scheduling loads from a receiver and making money on both ends if possible. And the person in between really doesn't matter, except as long as they can control it to get their money from one end to the other. And that's what they're looking at, to get that done so they can get paid. And that's what they do. They just look at the money that they're going to make. They don't really have any concerns about the industry except for the money on both ends, which makes it very difficult and very much a difficult thing to handle. And sometimes it becomes pretty chaotic.
Do you find that on your brokered loads, you end up getting stopped up at your drop-offs more often than what you do with customer loads?
Absolutely, every time. Longer times loading, longer times getting unloaded. A lot of things not handled. A lot of numbers not there. Zach will tell you. He's had many of them himself.
Yep. A number of times you go to those places, they'll take. You can always tell a difference between a brokered load and one of our actual direct customers that we deal with. You'll be there for a lot longer, either getting loaded or getting unloaded, and if you're not spending hours getting loaded, you're going to bite it on the tail end. That's almost always a given. But I'm trying to think of almost any time that I've had a broker load and had the right reference number. You walk up there, oh, hey, is it this reference number? You could have 8 or 9 numbers, and it's the one number you don't have because it's the one reference number that they didn't give us.
Of course.
Exactly.
Of course. So what I'm hearing here, Zach, is that when you pick up a brokered load, you're almost guaranteeing. How certain are you that you're going to be delayed, or it's going to take a lot longer than it would with a customer load?
Well, for me, what set in stone quite some time ago was unfortunately, it happened here at H&M, and this kind of set my tone in my opinion with a lot of brokers. I wish I could remember the name of this one. When I got here, there was a broker I had to deal with. I picked the load up. I was relatively short on time that day and went and got it, was down in Texas, got a couple hours up the road up to Amarillo, and the load had to be sitting up in Denver, Colorado, and I had managed to not have a problem at the initial pickup somehow. But the catch was, they wanted my number in order to be able to check on the load and, see where I was. And this is what did me in on never liking brokers much was I get a call. Mind you, it's a full 11-hour drive in order to get up to Denver from Amarillo, but I was going to make it happen. I get up there and I was told I could deliver to the Safeway in Denver, Colorado at 3:30 in the afternoon. Come to find out, they stopped receiving at noon.
Ugh.
On top of that, they had called me after I had talked to somebody else and told them not to call me first thing in the morning. Somebody over on the East Coast called me at the equivalent of 2 a.m. over in Texas. And ever since then, yeah. So that's kind of what set it in stone of knowing a lot of these brokers are just, if you get one that's not a pain in your butt, you got very lucky. But the moment you see it's not directly through us, it's almost a guaranteed headache. I mean, Coyote Logistics is another one that I've had a couple problems with. I know a couple other people have had problems with them. It's just certain ones you don't really want to deal with. Another great one is that we all know and have hit and miss with is C.H. Robinson.
Very big company.
Yep. I had problems with them over at Warner, for crying out loud. They double book loads, they triple book loads, and then you get there and nobody passed word along. Yeah, and nobody passed word along that, oh, hey, yeah, by the way, load's already been picked up. So,
because there's no warehouse space for it. So you sit there and wait for them to put space somewhere on the floor to get it off your truck, which nobody can do anything about. You can't blame them. They weren't supposed to get a load, but the broker wants the money. So the brokers had different people that are working in the Brokers Association. And those people are behind the desk and they get paid by how many loads they move. So they don't have no consideration of what's going on the road, what accidents have happened, what a driver's going through, what time it is, and what his life is at the time. They don't care. They just want their money and they don't care about what's going on.
And then on top of that, a lot of them want you to install something like Macro Point or one of those and have you install it on your phone, which I don't know how many people are aware of. I know a number of people that were affected by it it was either Macro Point or another similar one that you install on your phone had a major security breach.
Yeah, and it was on NBC News. Yep.
Ended up getting into people's phones and getting into their bank accounts and draining their bank accounts that way.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So
they were selling their information to these companies, advertisement companies, and then another person inside the advertisement company was taking this information, personal information, to your phone, and they were going into people's accounts and stuff. Criminals. It was bad. It was on NBC News.
So a number of these brokered loads, they open up I guess you could say, a can of worms in a bit of a way that just for a great example, one of our main customers that we do a lot of business with was Winfield. We do plenty of business with them, and we deal directly with them. I can usually just roll up there, find out if the load's ready or if it's not, and try and play nice with them. I might be able to get it loaded a little bit faster, but if I'm dealing with a customer that we directly deal with, there's no middleman, there's no extra phone call, there's no extra. I have to call H&M and get H&M to notify them, or some of the bills that are brokered, they'll have, oh, we want you to contact us at phone number XYZ and then contact your company in order to make sure the company notifies them. And then it's like, you find out later that even though you contacted both parties, when H&M contacts the broker, saying that, hey, for example, needing to reschedule an appointment, you get to the customer that you're delivering to and come to find out, and they never rescheduled it because the broker never rescheduled it. That's why I've actually had to make phone calls when I need a reschedule, because I just do not trust some of these brokers. Certain brokers I've dealt with, I might have a little faith in them, but lately I will still make that phone call myself. And as much as H&M might get on me a little bit about, hey, that's supposed to be our job, it's like, it's not that I don't have faith in you. It's that I know these brokers, when you call them and tell them to schedule it, still aren't going to schedule it. And then I'm going to be the one dealing with the repercussions on the tail end.
Right.
Like, hey, no, thanks. I'm good.
Dropping back to what Zach was saying about your telephone. What they were doing is getting our phones so they can ping us. They're making our phones their actual contact to us mobile in the truck, when our trucks have GPS already on them. Our trucks and our trailers are GPS. But it's so bad with them that our company won't allow brokers to GPS our trucks. They ask us if we'll do it so that they can get a load.
Sure.
And of course, people who know what they're doing won't let them because they know what's happening.
Which is why we now have the macro point and everything on the tablets.
Exactly.
Because a lot of drivers were getting to that point of, no, I'm not putting it on my phone.
Mm-hmm.
No, it's my phone. It's my personal phone. It's my money, my personal. H&M doesn't pay for our telephones.
Right. So it kind of sounds like communication is at a premium with these guys, and it sounds also like the communication can be kind of poor from their end. I don't doubt for a second that you drivers, pull your weight on the side of the communication that you're responsible for, because obviously that's your whole day, right? If you don't communicate, you don't know what's going on. You don't know when you're going to be where. But aside from just communicating better and maybe caring a little bit more about the driver, how do you guys propose that some of these problems get solved out there? What can the brokerages do to do better just on a daily basis for you?
Leave me alone.
The broker is a company that you hire to move your loads. So instead of them having another person in the office, these companies that regulate the loads, because it's a pain in the butt, because the truck is a truck. They could say the truck's going to be there, and there's an accident, or the truck broke down, or the driver fell asleep, or there's always something that can happen. So that becomes very much an expense to a company to have one person work the load. So they use a broker to do it. So then they don't care who the trucking company is that comes and gets the load and delivers it. The broker takes care of all the logistics. And that's what brokers do for a living. But brokers have a bunch of people in the office that get paid by how many loads a day they get. And all they do is scramble to get as much as they can in the day, just like the stock market. And that's what's going on. And C.H. Robinson's got about almost 3,000 representatives in just the broker firm. That's a lot of people.
That's a lot of people scrambling to just try to fill up. And you can see, if you zoom out there, with 3,000 people working in that company in that job,
doing 10, 15, 20 truckloads a day.
Right. And how could they ever, even if they wanted to think about the driver and be see the human rather than just the number, they're still probably working with too many people to be able to be efficient at that type of communication.
Exactly.
If you turn around and if you look at the brokerage part of it, ideally, I'm not big, and mind you, I'm not a big fan of centralizing everything. That's never really led to anything good. But the idea, if we could actually get a network, an actual network set in place to where companies that are trying to get a load moved could put it up on board. I know there's multiple different ones, but if we could get a main one where these could be posted and take out these middleman brokerages that are, trying to then snap up the difference, say they can move it for X price, because that's all these guys are basically doing is once the load is posted, they pick it up, then they say, oh, we can get it moved for price X. They profit the difference, and it helps unfortunately, drive down the cost of freight, which is a big problem already. And then they pocket the difference with Swift, Warner, CR England, Schneider. Any of these other mega carriers are able to move at, almost a loss on a number of loads versus companies like H&M, say, I'd probably be in the ballpark saying Morehouse, and a couple of these other ones that are smaller companies are, not able to play that game. They take a much harder hit if they have to move for, fractions rather than $1 or $2, price difference. If we could get to the point where these companies could post the load and post a price, or at least say, hey, it's negotiable between X and Y, and deal directly with the company that's actually going to move it, actually move up the cost of freight again, make it to where drivers are making more, make it to where the companies are making more, so they could hopefully, mind you, put some of that extra money that they're making toward, say, offices like we did for our office building, or, toward drivers, or toward better trucks or better equipment, stuff like that. It's these brokers in the middle are helping drive down the price because they're pocketing the difference, and then they don't give two hoots, so to speak, about if we get stuck, 3 or 4 hours loading or 3 or 4 hours unloading, because we don't start getting detention until after that third hour. And a lot of places, especially if it's brokered, a lot of places abuse the daylights out of that 3 hour mark. There's been a number of places I've been to that will wait right up until 2:59 to get you out of there. And I had one, it was 8 pieces, took 2 hours. I don't know how much the company turned as a profit, but it's still that's a long time just for 8 pieces.
Yeah.
Come on. Versus I could go to Winfield, Story City, or I could go to a handful of our direct customers that we deal with. Mind you, yes, there are some that are busy and take a while. They know me, or they know the company, and the company H&M actually carries some weight with it, and I could show up and I'm in and out of there, full trailer, floor to ceiling, 30 minutes.
Sure.
Sometimes less than that.
Yeah. Story City, I've had full trailer in and out of there in 15 minutes is the record I've had so far.
But see what the situation is, Marcus, is we get a really good load going to California, which we have a lot of them to Mid-American Warehouse, which are our windshield loads, which is chemicals for the farmers and for the trees out there. That's what we mainly carry for this company. And then when we get out there, we need to get the truck moving again. H&M does. That driver can't just sit there and camp out. It's got to get rolling. And when we don't have anything mainstream out there with our little connections that we have in California, we have to go to a broker. And the broker knows, well, I got H&M here. He got to move that truck. So I got this load here. I'm going to go ahead and get him for this on this load. So he's getting us a percentage of what we have on that load, and then the customer that's paying them to get a truck to move their loads paying them too. And that's how a broker works. They screw you on both ends. They're the snake with a double head. They got a head on both ends. They're getting us on both ends, and they're destroying the trucking company. The company. They're destroying trucking. They're actually the bad evil in trucking. And that's what makes a lot of drivers mad, makes a lot of drivers uncomfortable, and makes companies really, really strive. Swift had to close 2 of their terminals. In the last 6 months, they had to close them and get rid of so many drivers. Over 800 drivers Swift got rid of.
Wow.
Because of this situation right now.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. That information came from James Fonda.
Oh,
wow. That's crazy. Yeah. Well, it's a weird race to the bottom that it kind of causes, because it's like when Zach was saying, the prices keep going down because the brokers they're out there trying to make a deal, and they're getting, siphoning a little bit of the money off on both ends, like Joe was talking about there. It seems like the only thing that could happen would be freight prices would go down, and that obviously, especially after the year we just had in 2023, it's not really what we're looking for here. we need the market to turn around and head back up and to the right.
Well, don't get me and Zach wrong. Freight prices aren't that bad. Freight prices are good, but the brokers are taking the money because they're getting it from both ends. And then the fuel is eating us up. Yeah. Fuel is stupid right now. It's $1 difference on the East Coast than it is in the Midwest, and another $1 different on the West Coast. You know, every single cent counts. And when you can only break even, you're never breaking even in the trucking business because you got tires, you got miles, and every mile on a truck is less time it's going to be out there making money.
Sure.
Trailer too. The trailer's aging. And when you can't keep equipment after so many years, it's not viable. The repairs and the maintenance just doesn't add up to the length of the time of keeping it. So you have all of those things that we're up against right now, and we're not the only ones. We're a lot of freight companies out there having a hard time right now, and there's a lot of it has to do with our politics too, and what they're going through.
I was going to say that's
very big
point of. To the point of obviously talking about the broker end of it and unfortunately driving the cost of it all down, if we also take a look at what another portion of the issue is obviously we're getting, as we all know what's going on the whole border crisis. I'm not going to beat a dead horse with this, but I'm sure we've all seen it as drivers. We all complain about the same thing. You know, the brokers and all these drivers that we're getting that are not here, that are not originally from the U.S., that, if we're also being extremely honest, probably have absolutely no business driving a semi because they can barely drive a regular car.
You cannot read English whatsoever.
And part of the problem we see there is the brokers kind of play into this. They want a load being moved at, X speed, basically. They're anticipating a load being 1,000 miles next day, basically, which, if you give me 2 full drive days, yes, I can have it sitting there, in 2 days, 2 full days, next day, basically. But a lot of them are getting to the point where a lot of these brokers, we've actually lost a couple of contracts to, I wouldn't say this exact situation, but a similar situation of, they want the load there next day, which requires it being driven by a team. And here at H&M, best of my knowledge, we don't have team trucks.
Right.
So now they're getting to the point where these brokers are, one, profiting a huge difference best they can, and then putting the load out there for as little as they can to see if they can get anybody to bite. And you get these people that aren't from the U.S. that live, almost virtually out of their truck by very different standards than what we here live by, and they end up getting these people to drive for the equivalent of, I know some of them are driving for what CR England was advertising when I first got my foot in the door, which CR England was advertising, and I quote, the truck makes 32 cents a mile, which the truck was a team truck, meaning each driver made 16 cents a mile for every mile the truck moved. Wow. So now you're getting these other, individuals coming in that shouldn't be here or on work visas that are, living by very different standards and end up taking these really badly brokered loads that are paying very poorly, and it drives the price down, it drives the cost down, and it causes companies like, say, H&M or Morehouse or Barlow or any of these other companies that can't quite operate on that fine line, penny per mile difference. You're going to start putting them out of business because you're getting all these people that can operate at next to nothing and live off it, which is supposed to be inhumane anyway, and a violation of a number of acts, but they're still doing it just to exploit because they know they'll take it and won't complain, because compared to where they're originally from, they're very well off now suddenly, versus they could be even more well off if we weren't having to deal with this little, this little game that the brokers are trying to play with us.
Right. It's like there's
foul, so to speak.
Yeah, and it's like they kind of know almost in the back of their head, it doesn't matter how low they force the price, there's always going to be somebody that'll take it. And so they are more apt to just keep shoving that price down to the bottom. And that's that weird race to the bottom thing that I was talking about. It's if there's one person out there willing to take those loads at a loss, then they're going to keep pumping out loads at a loss. Why wouldn't they?
Okay, so this is what's going on. They get a load. The broker gets a load. All right. That load needs to be moved because it needs to be to their contract, the person that bought the load from this company by a certain amount of time. So that's when it gets closer to the time for it to be there, the price goes up. But the thing is, from the time the load's initiated, there's no payment to the broker or to the trucking company that moved that load for 30 days. So it's 30 days for the broker to get their load from the time the job's done, and 30 days for the trucking company to get their money from the time it's done. That's why everybody's in a hurry to get it paperwork in and done so that they can get that money coming in to keep the flow going. And it's a tremendous amount of logistics.
It is.
On both ends.
Yep. And it's hard to keep track of that stuff too. Just in my short time as a traveling salesperson, net 30 payments like that, what you're talking about, where there's a whole month between product delivery and payment, were an absolute nightmare. Because if you forget if one of them slips through the cracks in your record keeping, all of a sudden you're out thousands of dollars. And that's a real big
one could be an $8,000 load. Sure.
Yep, absolutely.
Sure.
So this has been a very enlightening conversation, fellas, because I knew that there was problems out here with some of the brokered loads. And I guess I didn't really understand the gravity of these problems. It's something that it's affecting the market. It's affecting the driver's well-being. It's affecting people out there that are working for next to nothing, if not at a loss. That seems to cause ripples throughout the entire industry, is I guess what I'm saying.
Right.
Well, and another tidbit, I guess, about it with the brokers, especially on the tail end, or even some, rarely with shippers do you have to worry with this, but most time this happens with the receiving end of it, with a brokered load more often than not, is if you get there, say, right on time, like your truck actually gets there 5 minutes early, but you get there in line, and by the time you get up to the actual check-in window, you're 5 minutes late, per se. But there's a number of brokers that if you aren't there, like on the dot or well before, by the time you actually sign in, you will not get anything for detention time, and you will turn into a work-in, which is nothing. It is the few words that every driver absolutely dreads hearing, because almost no matter where you are, it is very rare, but no matter where you are, hearing that you're going to turn into a work-in is almost a guaranteed 4 or 5 hour minimum.
Exactly.
Right? And you're not going to get paid for it. And it's ridiculous.
Regardless if it's your fault or not. Regardless if it's your fault or not.
Mm-hmm.
There could have been a traffic jam that held you up for an hour. An hour's 70 miles.
Right.
So
it's little things like that. The brokers, there are some brokers that, like I've said, they are very few and far between. And you occasionally get one that you don't mind doing business with because they aren't too horrible to deal with. But in comparison to us directly dealing with a customer, a great example that I know right offhand, I talked to the lady, I believe it responsible for booking the loads, was based out of MGI Grain up there in East Grand Forks. And she told me, especially during, peak COVID and all that fun stuff, that she was actually having to offer, due to cost of fuel and everything else, and due to the weight of the product, which a lot of these brokers won't take into account, she was having to offer somewhere in the 5 digits more to get people to pick up the load and drag it up there because of fuel expenses. Versus brokers, again,
they don't care.
Brokerages, they want it moved for as little as they have to fork out. They can turn as much of a profit as possible.
Sure.
And it's rough. I mean, that's why I'm kind of thankful to be a company driver. It's one less headache I have to put up with. So,
well, we used to be, last year we were doing great. Last year wasn't bad at all, really. But the thing is, what's happened now with this, Trump did a really great thing, so we thought, of having the free trade agreement between Mexico and Canada. Well, guess what? That's come back to bite us. That's really hurting the trucking business in America bad, because you've got these companies from overseas, Russian, African, that are bringing drivers from overseas into these other countries, okay, not into America, and legally giving them license, and they come into this country, and they actually come up to the receivers and the shippers, can't speak a word of English, and hand them their telephones for translation.
It's just another part of the communication issue there, it seems like.
And they're hauling for nothing. They have raggedy-ass trucks that never get washed, parts hanging off, taped on together, and they're making it money out here, and they're screwing us.
And some of those brokerages themselves, I'm not trying to harp on them too badly, but some of them brokerages themselves, some of the people they have that will be the ones to call you, you could tell English was not their first language, and it's barely even their second language. I get it if you're putting forth the effort and trying, by all means, I appreciate it, but you can tell, which I find annoying having to be here in the U.S. That used to be the whole concept was, you come here, you're gonna pick up our language, our heritage, stuff like that. You're going to
live in America.
You're going to try to, what's the word I'm looking for?
Be an American.
Assimilate, basically.
And there you go. That's what I was looking for. And you get these brokerages, and I saw a video of this, and you get these companies now that are going all electronic in order to check in everything, and when you go to check in, you hit the buzzer, it rings to some third party out in middle of absolute nowhere on the other side of the country on the other side of the globe, and they're like, oh, what country are you in? It's like, what do you mean, what country am I in?
Yeah, that's a question you don't get every day, that's for sure.
How did this buzz you in Israel or some
India,
how did this buzz you all the way over
Bangladesh?
There? And I just really, and then they don't have the video was
no idea.
The video was of a guy that was he was a wrecker, and he was bringing in one of their trailers that I guess it had some repairs done on it. And he was just trying to get through, and they didn't have anybody on site, no physical body on site to open the gate to let him in. It took him 2 hours to eventually get somebody there in order to let him in. With these brokers, it's kind of the same thing. If you're lucky, if they're here in the U.S. and trying to get through to them, you've got to try and play phone tag with 30 or 40 other people. And then, in my case, when I first got here to H&M, I had told the one guy, hey, don't bother me before time X. He agreed to it. Next person rolls in, not even, 12 hours later, and they call me at 2 a.m. asking me if I'm going to make it.
Yep.
I thought I was about to get fired from H&M because of what I told the individual, because of how furious I was. I'm not. You can ask Joe. I am not a morning person.
And you don't have to be. You don't have to be as long as you're on time. The guy Zach is one of our number one drivers. He's in the top 10. He's proven himself over and over again. He's been used as the model for the Samsara when we first got it. He was one of the first 3 people to experiment with it. So he's very knowledgeable.
Model, I call that guinea pig, but sure.
Well, you're very intelligent, and you're very disciplined. I mean, you spent 8 years over in Germany, and Europe, fueling bombers and in the Air Force and stuff. You're very disciplined, and you're a very good driver, and the company really appreciates you. So,
well,
the thing is, it's not going to change until Congress does something about implicating these other drivers coming into the United States and stealing the trucking company. The trucking company, the United States cannot live without trucks. 24 hours down would devastate this country. Would devastate it.
Oh, yeah. And bring it to a screeching halt.
Yes.
Yeah,
It would bring everybody to their knees.
We saw a prime example of that with the trucker convoy only a handful of years ago.
Yep.
It didn't take much. But I think to another point with these brokers and to the point with the whole government stepping in, I saw part of the other podcast about this one with government stepping in about this, but if we could get the government to step in, mind you, if they go down with the speed limit deal, that's not going to end well for anybody.
But that's not going to happen. That's been voted out.
I hope so. But
yeah, it's been voted out.
I hope it never comes back. But if government steps in with it, hopefully they can get it right, because that's, as even Reagan said at one point, the worst 9 words you could ever hear is, I'm from the government and I'm here to help.
Amen.
The trucking industry is already kind of hurting enough, and the last thing I want is, hey, I'm from the government and I'm here to help.
That's a lot like sending Shaq to the free throw line when you're down 2 with only 3 seconds left. You look at it and you go, hopefully he'll make it.
A miracle. It would have to be a miracle.
Yeah,
that video where he just lobs it, like he underhand lobs it off the backboard and then just slam dunks it. That's what we could hope for them to actually get it right, because that was on. I mean, technically it works.
Yep, technically it works. It's a workaround.
It worked around and it worked, but do I have that much faith in the government to get that one right with the brokers?
Nope. I don't either, man. I really don't. But listen, fellas, I could sit here and talk to you guys about this for hours. There's no question in my mind, but we are running a lot long in this interview, so I got to let you both go. But I want to say thank you to both of you for coming on and sharing these concerns with me. And I also hope that you'll both tune in to this podcast when it airs, because we're going to have Tim from JFL Logistics on, and I'm going to ask him, along with retired H&M driver Denny Stone, about some of the things that JFL tries to do to help solve these problems for you and circumvent some of the problems before they happen. Tim's a great guy, and he seems to have the driver's best interest in mind. And so I'm really looking forward to hear how he competes with these problems at JFL. So tune into that, guys. It's coming up right around the corner here. Joe Bargonetti, thank you so much for being here, my friend. We'll get you back on soon.
You're welcome, Marcus. Thank you.
And Zach Beckman, the model of an H&M driver, from what I hear. It's so cool to hear that coming from the guy that recruited you. I mean, you've rose all the way to the top, my friend. Things are going well, even though sometimes you're pulling your hair out there.
Just a smidge. I think he's overselling it. Just a smidge, but
we still work for a very good company. We still work for one of the number one companies in this country.
Yeah, and let me do
going anywhere else.
Let me do an oversell job here too. You guys got the best podcast in the country, man. I'll tell you right now. I mean, maybe a little bit biased, but I think so.
Yeah, it sounds about right. I just wish our company would advertise it more to all our drivers.
We're working on it.
Podcast.
We're working on it. I promise you. We're going to get this thing out. We're going to, you guys are a huge part of it, coming on here and offering all of the insight and a peek behind the curtain of what it's like. You guys are what make this podcast great. So I really appreciate the time, fellas. Please be safe out there on the road, and we'll get back in touch with you very soon. All right.
Thank you, Marcus. God bless.
I got retired H&M driver Denny Stone hanging out with me right now. Denny, you have an extensive broadcasting career, and there was something that jumped into my mind last night after we got done chatting that I have to ask you before we get to our interview right now.
What's that?
Who's the most famous person you ever met while you were doing your broadcasting career?
It's a tough one because a lot of years in Austin, Texas, just about everybody in country radio and blues and most genres came through there. Of course, I've known Willie Nelson for years. George Strait's guitar player played for my wedding years ago.
Wow.
I knew George back in the 80s when he was really just getting going. So, yeah, I've known a lot of people. Charlie Daniels was a friend. I really always thought the world of him. He was just a class act all the way around. In fact, a brief story if we have time. We were doing a benefit for the Boys and Girls Clubs, and Charlie was on the bill. Ricochet was an up and coming group, and they were opening for him. And we're sitting on the bus and hear the crowd just chanting, "Charlie, Charlie." And he's like, "What is going on? Shouldn't Ricochet be on stage?" Well, turns out there was a huge storm. Their plane had to be diverted, and they were in vans trying to get there. And Charlie just turned around and told the guys, he said, "Grab your stuff, let's go." A man of his caliber with his history, his stardom, he went and opened for an up and coming act.
That's
Not many
so
would
cool.
do that.
No, they would not. That's such a cool story. And Denny, I'm going to ask you about a lot more of those as the days go on, because I love hearing stories like that. How cool that you had George Strait's guitar player play at your wedding. I played at my own wedding. So nobody would come out. I didn't have any friends like that. So, and that other laugh you hear joining us right now on the phone is Tim Krueger from JFL Logistics. Tim, we appreciate the time. Thanks for being here.
Oh, yeah. Thanks again, Marcus. It's always a pleasure to come on and talk to you about freight and, kind of how things are going.
Absolutely. And we're definitely going to get into that. I want to start out by asking Denny a question to give some context to our conversation here. Denny, I want to turn now from broadcasting to driving, since you've got these two great careers that we get to draw from here. What was your take on brokered loads versus customer loads when you were a driver? Was there any difference between them? Was one more of a headache than the other? How did you how did you navigate those waters as you were driving?
Almost without fail, client loads were no problem. Usually in and out in a reasonable amount of time. Product was ready. They were expecting you. Brokered loads, I almost hated. You can cut this out if you have to, but C.H. Robinson is a curse word. I hated to find out I had a load from C.H. Robinson. They were, in my opinion, absolutely the worst. I'm sure there are good brokers out there, but it always seemed to be a pain. And there's a number of reasons why, but we can elaborate later on those unless you want me to just jump in here. It's up to you.
Well, the thing that kind of spurred the question was that recently we've been talking with drivers about delay at facilities, and many of them have told me that kind of the same thing, that, brokered loads a lot of the times are the ones that end up causing them some delay at shippers and things like that. And that's kind of why I wanted to bring Tim Krueger onto this, because I want to hear how JFL tries to circumvent these problems, or if there's anything that they can do, because I understand also that a lot of times drivers have a perception of something because they're not necessarily right there in the office. A lot of the same ways that dispatchers and others will have a perception of what's going on the road and might not completely understand it. So, Tim, talk to me a little bit about what you hear from drivers when you get a chance to talk to them. Do you find that sometimes the brokered loads are a little bit more of a headache for drivers than the customer loads?
They definitely can be, because you're throwing an extra person in there as far as communication goes. So that's where I think a lot of separation can happen and a lot of miscommunication can happen. So the big thing, like we do, for instance, at like JFL, like since we are owned by H&M, we make sure we do the right thing by the truck. We know what it's like to run a truck. I came from dispatch at H&M, came from Ruan Transportation, Warner. I understand what it takes to run a truck and how to price a truck out. So, and I know to ask the right questions too before loading. Hey, is this load going to be ready when we get there? Is product behind? Is it staged? Like, do we know what's going on with that product when a driver arrives? And also, in turn, like I make sure I talk to the driver or talk to dispatch. Hey, what are you looking at for an ETA? Like a solid ETA I can provide to the customer so they know when he gets there, there's less wait time. Sometimes a lot of brokers, like when you speak of, the likes of CH, or, you hear one of Total Quality or TQL, or some people call it TQ Smell. They're very known for being difficult to work with, paying at like net 30, or even past net 30 to like net 60, net 45. To where us at JFL, we know that cash flow is important to a truck. So we understand, and since H&M does our accounting too, which is fantastic, we're paying carriers within 7 to 10 business days after delivery. So we know that process. We understand it. And, that's kind of where you come into that huge problem of, it's just like a huge communication issue with some brokers.
Mm-hmm.
We run into that, like, oh, brokers are just cutting rates and doing this and that. And yeah, there is that, just because of seeing seeing the market out there and where there's a lot of trucks, price will drop. But we try and stay true to, we're there for the truck, and, being owned by H&M, we don't have that debt behind us. So we try and do the right thing to be the right type of brokerage to allow that service on both customer and truck side.
That's great. And do you think, Tim, that just that being owned by H&M helps you guys circumvent a lot of those problems that other brokerages that maybe aren't so fun to work with have a lot of problems with? Like, is that relationship, do you learn so much from that business relationship that you obviously have with H&M that it just helps you be a better broker?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like, we utilize H&M a lot on especially the agriculture and hopper side for H&M. We have a couple customers that we are now working together on to own that entire side of the business. We're telling customers like, hey, listen, you're going to have access to 100 trucks on the hopper side, but you're also going to have access to JFL's carrier side that they, run through the ring of, we're setting them up through RMIS. So it's the right carrier, it's the right trucking company that's on it, that's hauling your freight, and that's going to own that capacity to make sure your freight moves on the people that say they're moving it on. So we're starting to work together and partner together to provide that. So that's how we see that fit, to keep that same service level that H&M has kept over for the last 30 plus years, for us to really grind that into carriers or customers as well.
Denny, as a former driver, hearing Tim talk about the way the JFL tries to navigate these waters, what are your thoughts?
It sounds good. And like I said, I'm sure there are good brokers. I'm sure I ran brokered loads I didn't even realize were brokered loads because they ran smoothly. The only time, it's when you get the bad penny is when it gets your attention.
Mm-hmm.
One question I did want to pose to you, since you have both, dispatch and broker experience, is, well, I'll preface this by saying I always felt like you were treating me like the dumb 5-year-old child. You don't see the big picture when I would call in and question something. Dispatcher understands, load planner understands, broker understands, but I'm too stupid to figure this out for myself. And I always resented that. Why do we have to be kept in the dark? Is it some big master plan? And why couldn't, for instance, here's an example, something that I thought of for years, especially if you're a driver that has successful experience, you have a number of years, you have 100% on-time delivery, you meet all these criteria that they may set out. Why couldn't they set up I would say like a mini board or a condensed version of the board that y'all look at and say, okay, here's 6 options, 10 options, a dozen options. Which load would you like next? Why can't that be brought into the mix so the driver has a little more control over where he's going? And, I understand there's a lot of factors that come in. Other drivers need to get home and these other things, but couldn't there be a condensed version? If nothing else, say 4 loads. Say, okay, we got this load, this load, this load. Which one do you want? And let the driver have a little bit of control over his own destiny rather than just taking what is thrown at him.
Yeah, I can definitely shine some light on that for you, Denny. So from one brokerage I've worked at in the past, a lot of it was, money, money, money. They're trying to make a buck. They're like, hey, do this load. It's going to be great. They're going to feed you up, full of BS, the way I've, from working at that brokerage to what I'm doing now and doing my own. And, James gave me the reins for that is, I run one guy out of Illinois and he loads up to Michigan, Wisconsin, Indiana, Iowa. We'll go down to KC sometimes for me, Ohio. And I'll say, hey, Sam, like, this is what I got for you. We can load in Chicago today. We can go to Lansing. I can load you DDGs back. I could push this Gladstone load out for you if you want me to. Let me know what you want to do. So how I see it is, I don't run the truck. That's with the driver. So what he wants to do is all by him. When I lease trailers out too, I'll take cuts on my margin to keep that guy in the trailer that we're running, because I know we provide good quality equipment. So I want to keep him in that. So if it's like maybe his dad is a little further, yeah, I'll give him, sometimes all the money in the load to get him moved, to make him happy, to give it to him. Some customer or some brokerages, we're a little small, but we have plans to have our own load board, to where we'll send it out to every single driver we're moving and say, hey, this is what we're working on today. This is what we're working on tomorrow. If you see a couple that piece up, here you go, grab them. They're yours.
I like that.
Yeah, exactly. So we try and want to keep that transparency open to drivers. At Warner, they have a great program to developing, dispatchers, load planners, everything under the sun. And, they say, hey, these are people, they're not drivers. You treat them with respect. They're like the people who sit next to you in the office. So I took that to heart. Any driver I talk to, anyone I talk to, I don't even see it as a driver. It's like, you have a name, you're a person, you're trying to make money as I am too, and let's have a conversation. Some people are, like I said, there's brokers who are out there to make a buck, or there's brokers out here who want to do the right thing and be ethical. And that's what I strive to do for JFL. So, I hear your pain points. I hear about it all the time.
When I would say want to go visit family, I've got family all over the country. I originally would say, hey, when you get a load heading out such and such a direction, throw it at me. But I guess the dispatcher is overwhelmed. They can't keep all of that in mind. So what I came down to is I literally had to put in for home time just to stop in and have coffee with my mother or something, If I saw the load that was going that way, I know I could stop in, I could overnight there, have dinner with her, and then still deliver the next morning. That's the kind of options and flexibility I'm kind of talking about. And it sounds like maybe you're moving in that direction. I'd love to see that. That would be wonderful for the drivers, even though it's past my time, but still.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Because obviously, like, we all have lives, right? And you want to make something work. And that's just the communication part. Like, I tell my team, communication. So if a driver's like, hey, can I pick this up on Friday and I'll swing this way and visit my, friends or my parents, and then I'll make sure I'll have it there by noon on Monday. Yeah, cool. Mm-hmm. Sounds like a great plan. Or if it's, hey, like, it's my mom's birthday on Monday, can I deliver this a day late? Absolutely. Like, it's freight. Like, I'll take the heat from a customer if they really get upset about it, because, you got a life out there. You're by yourself a lot of the time. And if you need that time, take it. For me, it's like I said, it's freight. It's going to get there. Being a day late's fine. But as long as that communication's there and I can share that with my customer, all good. And I wish more people would see it that way. Some people are like, oh, that driver's lazy because he likes to stop, he likes to do this. So be it. That's what he wants to do. Let him do it. I try and have as much flexibility on my freight as possible. Hopefully some other brokers can hear this and kind of think that way as well.
For sure. No, I think that's really important, because it's like everything else. It's fluid, right? You're moving through this. You're learning how to do it as you go. You're adapting to whatever situation you're in. And just knowing that you've got the driver's best interest in mind, Tim, I think is probably head and shoulders above some of the places that aren't affiliated with trucking companies and are just out there trying to turn over a dollar as a brokerage. And, I guess it makes sense that maybe they just wouldn't have the humanity that's involved in it. Seeing that person as a person, like you said, rather than a driver. It's easy to delay a driver for 5 hours. Who cares? It's not easy to delay a person for 5 hours, and it's all about how you perceive it. Yep,
absolutely. And that's the one thing I loved, coming to H&M, and that kind of drawn me to H&M was, hey, if a driver on your board does call you, pull up their picture. We take pictures of every single driver that works at H&M. See who they are, get to know them. Like and Marcus, you've heard me say this, like, I'm friends with probably everyone who's on my board at H&M. I still talk to them to this day, see what they're doing. And then when they haul a load for JFL and I see them on it, I call them. I'm like, hey, guess what? You're home one of my loads. Like, it's like I can dispatch you again, you know, and it's nice to see, and I appreciate that. And you know, a lot of these brokers, you know, not to go too far into it, you know, they'll try and just hammer growth. They'll bring in anyone with no experience, just guys to make a buck, to sell, and they put no thought into it. It's I'm here to make a buck. Who cares what's going on the back end of things? And you know, you could completely ruin a guy's day. You could completely ruin a guy's life. Like, I take that stuff into consideration. I want my team to take that into consideration. Even if I have to, you know, if there's downtime for 8 hours and they're paying on 3 of it, I'll dip into my pocket to take care of them, you know, because I care about the driver. I want them out on the road. You know, the U.S. economy, America, we need drivers out on the road. So I get it, and I want my team to get that too.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. And you don't want a pissed off driver the next time you need him to take a load for you. So it stands to reason that you might dip into Tim's pocket a little bit, try to scratch their back a little bit. I love that.
Yeah, absolutely. Because there might become a time where, you know, I scratch their back several times and they're like, hey, look, is there any chance you can help me on this? You know, and it might not work for him, but he's willing to work with you because you work with him. You know, it's a little bit like a relationship. There's a lot of give and take. And I think when it really comes down to it, a lot of mutual respect. You know, I make sure my team has the utmost respect with customer, carrier, whomever we're working with. It's all about respect. So we make sure we push that into who JFL is and what we represent.
Where was the respect for me when you gave that tracksuit with all the gold tigers on it to wear during the photo shoot that I had to take for H&M? I feel like I was very disrespectful. You should have just said, hey, I can't find it. I threw it in the river. You could have said any of those things and saved me, Tim. But instead, there's all these photos of me on the internet floating around in a tracksuit with a bunch of gold tigers on it. What the heck, man?
Hey, that's Grant. Grant was like, hey, Marcus wants to wear this. Yeah. And I was like, Grant, I gotta wash it. It's like 8 o'clock at night. Like, I'm trying to. Yeah, you gotta go check that out, Denny. It's hilarious. But yeah, Grant said you wanted to wear it.
Grant's a liar.
Oh yeah.
But you know what? He gets what he wants, and maybe I should learn from that a little bit. So,
oh yeah. Hey, you look good in it, though. You got to take that.
Well,
you look great.
Thanks, man. I don't quite have the figure that you do. I've only got 5'9", and I'm almost as wide as I am tall from some angles. So the tracksuit was kind of a weird one for me, but we did have a good time at the photo shoot for sure.
Go. Good. Glad you did.
Back on track here real quick. We've got a little bit of time left here, and I wanted to bring this up if we did have some time. I've heard and been reading quite a bit about double brokerage schemes, and I'm not sure really how prevalent they are out there. And Tim, I'm going to come to you for that.
That was one of my questions.
Okay, perfect. Yep. Denny, I'll let you ask it. I'll just stand out of the way.
From what I'm hearing, I'm thinking this doesn't apply to you, but I asked prior to this podcast, I reached out to a few driver friends of mine and had a few questions come up, and David is one that wanted to, and I've had this happen to me a number of times too. You show up, give them your load number, and they go, oh, we just got that truck loaded. He's heading out. So they're double booking loads, which is a huge waste of my time.
Yep.
So is that just something that's going to happen in the industry, like the airlines overbooking flights, or is there a way to combat this?
So the one for like double booking, we will never do that. The only time we will find another carrier for a load that if it's a just in time load and he's not going to make it, that's the only time, we'll say, hey, we're going to keep you on it. But if we find someone in the meantime, while you're unloading right now to make on time before you can, we will have to book that truck and then pay that guy a tonu for booking his truck and taking care of that. We'll never book 2 trucks and say whoever gets there first, then cancel on other one. That's ethically wrong in my book, and some brokers do that. The big thing we see double brokering is, we'll post a load on DAT or, bulk loads, truck stop, and we'll get a phone call from someone posing as a carrier. And realistically, they're not a carrier. They're a scam. We actually got hit by it when we first started because we didn't have the right software yet to be able to watch that. A lot of brokers use a website that It's called Carrier 411. It's a site for only brokers can use. They can report people who are, in the business to scam people. And once they're reported as double brokerage, it'll pop up on that MC as a double broker. So all they're really trying to do is say, hey, yeah, I got a truck I can pick up on time. I can do this. And then all they do is go repost that load and then sell it to another carrier. So we have software in place right now called RMIS that we use that will monitor everything from a dispatcher's IP address, their contact information, everything ran through the federal government, runs it all through that. But then we also use Carrier 411 because when we post a load, our first 5 phone calls are double brokers every single time.
Are you serious? Your first 5?
Yep. Usually our first 5 are double brokers. And then after that, we start getting in, carriers are calling in and it's legit. The big one we're seeing now that you have to do some due diligence on now, and they're getting smarter. What they're doing is when MC numbers go out of business or drop, these guys are buying them up and then saying like they have all this data that they have 50 trucks, 600 inspections, all this stuff under it, and they look legit, but realistically they're not. It was a carrier that went out of business like 5-6 years ago. And thankfully with Carrier 401, we can look that information up, see when it went out of business. We can call the previous owner and just ask them what's going on. And they tell us. We caught one yesterday and I monitored that carrier. And, I looked 2 days later because I got a report in my email saying, hey, a report was just following this carrier that you're monitoring. 3 more reports came in that day of double brokering.
Wow.
So yeah, it's rampant. It's wild. It's crazier than it's ever been. It's getting more scams out there, left, right, and center. I'm seeing it more and more every day, and someone needs to step in and get it under control because it's getting ridiculous.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I've from what I've seen, just browsing the sites, Freight Waves and Transport Topics and all these, I see an article about it here and there. I never would have guessed, based on the amount of literature that I've seen on it, that it's such a big part of your day.
Yep. It's bad. There's carriers out there that are legit carriers, not to drop. They're well known in the industry, but Landstar, they're well known in the industry for double brokering. So what they do is they hire out independent contractors for brokerages because they have a brokerage license and they pose as, or they technically are, Landstar, but they're just brokering out your freight. It's not actually going on a Landstar truck. So when they call us, I just go, is this Landstar truck and trailer? And literally 10 out of 10 times they say no. So we just choose not to work with Landstar, but they're one of them. They're one of the bigger ones. They have a ton of trucks, like a ton. But they're one of them that they hire independent contractors for brokerages that they sign on owner ops. They run under that MC, but it's not a Landstar truck and trailer. So technically it's double brokering.
I mean, I've never been one to call for more red tape, but seems like maybe a little red tape might help out in this situation a little bit.
Yeah, it has to happen.
Or more clients and load planners, and not to offend you, my friend, but get brokers out of this thing. That way, if H&M's got the clients, we don't have to reach out to a broker for the backhaul, right?
No, for sure. Absolutely. And that's what we're trying to do with H&M and JFL tie-in. That, our customers are their customers, and then we don't take customers from them. We just offer another trusted carrier if H&M can't make it on time.
That makes sense.
And cutting out the broker, I get that. But there's some owner ops out there. There are some smaller companies that don't have a sales team to go find a client, find the customers to move that freight. So what we offer and what, a brokerage can help is I'll put the manpower to it, find clients for you, find lanes that you want. And what I'll do before I even quote anything, I reach out to carriers first and say, hey, I'm going for this lane. Let me know if you're interested and give me a quote. And then I go quote it.
I get it. You've got slack times of the year when freight's not moving, particularly agricultural freight may not be moving. And so you've got to reach out to keep the drivers moving. Also, like guy lives in Florida. You got freight going into Florida, but it's tough getting freight coming out. I understand those things. Okay. I don't want to run out of time before I get to 2 more questions. I'm not taking this over, am I, Marcus?
No, you're doing good. You run with it, Denny. You take the reins, man.
Had a concern, and Tareen was on Stacy's board just like I was. when she drove for the H&M, and I reached out to ask her, and she said the one thing that she hated about brokered loads, and I can agree, Stacy was real good about not giving our phone number, our contact information, but a broker would get our contact information, and every 4, 6, 8 hours, they're calling. They don't care if you're asleep. They don't care what's going on. They just need an update. I'm like, I told you my ETA yesterday. If it changes, I'll let you know, but leave me alone.
It's like a bad girlfriend, huh? Just won't stop calling in the middle of the night.
Yep, there's some bad brokerages out there that'll call you every 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours. We don't ask for driver, so we ask for driver information on van loads. That's where we see the most fraudulent activity. So we'll either ask for a tracking link, either if they use Samsara, Motive, PeopleNet, whatever they use, we'll take that, and we're okay with that. That gives us visibility. I don't have to call and butt the driver. I don't need to butt dispatch. I can just watch it. We also use tracking called MacroPoint. I don't call the driver ever. We get the phone number from the driver. We put them on MacroPoint. It sends you a link to the MacroPoint app. You download it on your phone. You hit start, and that's it. It just tracks you. It'll ping your phone every hour, and I just see that you're moving down the road, and I don't even mess with it. It geofences it all for me. So when you pull into the shipper, it marks you arrived. When you pull out of that geofence, it marks you departed. I don't mess with it. I usually don't touch it. There are times, I do like talking to the driver just to make sure, especially if it's like, special instructions that are a laundry list long, because I have a couple customers that are like that, that I have to kind of just be like, hey, this is what's going on. Just want to make sure your dispatcher explains to you, they want this, this, and this, and just make sure the driver's good with it. So that's kind of the only thing. But yeah, I hear you. That does get really annoying. I don't know if I can say it on here, but we run an owner op on a lane out of Sioux City going to Commerce City. And the driver reached out to my carrier rep and said, who's this Dan guy? He's calling me. He's like, oh yeah, it's Dan. He's our new CSR. He's just trying to get updates from me. And he goes, God, he's a check called Nazi over there. And he runs like 4 loads a day for us. So he's just like trying to keep everything in track. And we don't have tracking on him either, because he didn't want to do MacroPoint. So on the agriculture side, it's harder because a lot of these guys are like farmers and, good old boys on the farm and whatnot. And they're like, yeah, you're not tracking my phone. Absolutely not.
Right.
So, some guys are like, yeah, just call me. I'll tell you. So, to answer that question, yeah, I try and do most where I don't have to communicate with the driver, but the way I am, I'm a very personal person. I just like talking to the driver, get to know them, especially if they're going to do several loads for me. Always good to meet new people is the way I see it.
Yep. Well, as long as you're not a pest, I wouldn't be resentful of it. Yeah, but
for sure.
Every time you have a shift change, somebody new is going to call me. That gets annoying. All right. Last question is from Mike out of Florida. And Mike's concern was, he said, well, okay, we got a dispatcher, we got a load planner, we got a broker. Why am I having to call the consignee? Like, aren't they earning their money? Why should I have to take my time to stop and call somebody? I didn't run into that a whole lot. In fact, usually I welcomed having contact information, if I needed it. But
yeah, it makes it easier. You're getting rid of your planner, your dispatcher, and the broker. You're going straight to the source.
Well, like for instance, I made good time. I was expecting it to take longer. I made good time. I could reach out and I could say, look, I'm a few miles away. I could either bring it in this afternoon or I'm good with tomorrow morning. And probably half the time they'd say, yeah, we're waiting on that stuff. Bring it on. But you give them the option. I'm not saying, reschedule my appointment or anything. I'm just saying, hey, if I could be there if you like.
That's a good way to put it. So a big thing we do here is we give the customer the option. Say, hey, I got A, B, and C option for you. Let me know which one you want to do. So we'll do it that way. But, when it comes with why do I need to call the consignee? Why do I need to call the receiver and give them an ETA? So some of our customers, so we do some apples. We'll move some apples, and we have a customer who likes to talk to the driver. The actual president likes to talk to the driver. He wants to make sure that, whomever he's working with knows how to get in there. Sometimes it can be a little difficult. And he's like, yeah, I just like to talk to him. Just make sure, we're all on the same page. So it runs smoothly for their operation. So we have a customer like that. for us, I just tell them, hey, just let me know your ETA. I'll let them know when you're going to be there. And if that changes, let me know. I usually call out to them. I know H&M, they tell their drivers. I know for the hopper side, Denny, you might be able to correct me on the van side, but I know on the hopper side, they never want the driver to call the consignee. Was it different on the van side?
They didn't like it so much, but mainly it was because drivers were trying to reschedule appointments, everything, and just making headaches for everybody concerned. Like I said, I would call, for instance, the main reason I would call a consignee is to double check directions. For instance, my navigation, my Gavin navigation system didn't agree with Google Maps. And I'm like, okay. So I would just call and say, hey, which is the best way to come in? And if I did get somebody on the phone, probably half the time they would say, well, where are you? When can you be here? I'm like, well, I'm due tomorrow morning at 10, but I could be there this afternoon if you'd like. That's the way that conversation would usually happen. I didn't reach out. I wouldn't call out and go, hey, I'm scheduled for Friday. Can I deliver on Wednesday? I never did that. And I understand why, dispatchers and load planners just pulling out their hair when people did that. I get that.
Yeah. Yeah. We have certain customers where they don't want people calling in. They like to keep that one person contact. Normally I just, I'll ask a driver before I even give their number out, or I'll say, hey, is it okay if my driver calls you? I make sure I ask the right questions to make sure everyone's happy. Especially if it's a tough spot to get into, I'll just be like, hey, is it okay if I just have the driver reach out to you so you can get them in? Like you said, just to make sure you're navigating in the right way and you're getting in the easiest way possible for you and your truck.
The other reason I would call is if it was, say, a late afternoon or evening delivery, I would call to find out if they had a safe place for me to park. Because you get out of somewhere, they turn you loose 8:00 at night, and you're trying to find a parking place. You're doing that, circle in the parking lot at the local TA. Yeah, that was one of my stresses. So that's another reason I would reach out to say, hey, if I park back in the back, don't bother anybody, don't make a mess.
Yeah. Absolutely.
There are drivers that will empty their trash, but
I know that's one thing H&M does great about. Like when you go into shipping or receiving, they are required. If it's a new place you guys are going into or a driver is going into, they call to get operations hours. If it's firm cutoffs, is it by appointment, first come first serve, overnight parking, kind of the layout of how it all works, the best way to get in there. And then we'll route it in there as they're talking, and we'll watch Samsara and just make sure we're understanding the directions too. So H&M does a great job of that, just to make sure you guys have all the information possible going in there. So it's nice and easy, to assist you as much as possible. But yeah, it's, back to the original question. It's, some people like to keep their customers close. But some guys are just lazy and are like, yeah, call the consignee with your ETA, let them know, and don't care. I like to know, but some people are, some brokers and some people are like that, where they just tell the driver to call and give an ETA. So,
it really sounds like, just hearing you guys go back and forth on some of this stuff, Tim, that you are with JFL trying to solve some of these problems that are constantly rearing their ugly heads. And I mean, just listening to your confidence in the fact that you understand what the drivers are dealing with out there, and you are trying to take steps to make it easier on them, and doing it in all sorts of different ways. And I don't want to speak for the drivers out there, but I think it sounds like you're trying your best. You're doing your damnedest to make this thing run smooth. So thank you for coming on here and sharing all of this insight with us. It's really appreciated.
Oh yeah, absolutely. No, I appreciate you guys having me on. And, with any driver listening that's an owner op out there, please reach out to us, van, hopper, reefer, we'd love to work with all of you and, let you know what we have and what we have moving, and would love to get you the price that you need and keep you moving. So I hope anyone's listening that you can plug that out for me. That'd be great.
We'll do it. Did. Yeah, just did. It's the best plug you could give it. That's Tim Krueger. He's got a sweet tracksuit, but he also works at JFL Logistics, and we're always happy to have you on here, Tim. We'll get you back on in the future, talk about it again, okay?
Awesome. Thanks, Marcus. Like I said, it's always great to be on with you, Denny. It's looking forward to talking with you more and more as I get brought on here.
Sounds good. Good to talk to you, Tim.
All right, H&M Trucking, that does it for episode number 47. Thank you so much for sharing your time with us here today. All of us here at the H&M Trucking Podcast are very grateful for everybody clicking that subscribe button, downloading the podcast each week. It takes a lot of people to make this thing happen the way that it does, and the only one that you ever hear from is me. So I want to take a second real quick here at the end of episode 47 to thank especially my editor extraordinaire, Mr. Mike. That guy is a true badass, and he always makes me sound way better than what I sound in real life. So don't ever meet me in a room where I'm actually standing, because you might be disappointed. I want to thank also our guys from Web and Systems, somebody I haven't shouted out for a very long time, if ever, actually. Tim and Joshua doing great work there. Over on the YouTube team, of course, we have Haley and Tyler. Those guys always making me look better than I actually look in real life. So listen, this would be a real shoddy operation if it was just me, but it's not just me, and I'm very thankful for that. So thank you to my awesome team. I know that there's more people to include there. I'm sorry if I forgot you today, but I'll definitely get to you next time. As far as H&M Trucking is concerned, all we got there is a kick-ass company full of kick-ass people. Look, you keep putting them in front of me, I'll keep doing my job. It's that simple. Today, I was blessed to talk to retired H&M driver Denny Stone, who's going to be joining us a lot more in the future, so look forward to that. And also, of course, our guy from JFL Logistics, Tim Krueger. It's always a pleasure to have him on. That dude is so knowledgeable, and he can talk. I mean, look, I'd give the guy his own podcast if he wanted it. I'm not really the arbiter of that type of thing, but if he called me and said, hey, can I have one? I'd be like, yeah, fire it up, brother. He's great. And also, Joe Bargonetti, Zach Beckman, two others that are absolutely awesome to talk to. Really appreciate you guys sharing your time with us here on the H&M Trucking Podcast for episode 47. And don't forget, you're one of those new drivers we've been shouting out. As I said off the top, you want to be on the podcast, just get in touch with Sherry Vogler, said it right that time, or Eve Essery back at the terminal. They will get you in touch with me. Thank you all so much for being here today. Stay safe out there. Keep the shiny side up. Oh, and stay fresh cheese bags. You knew it was coming. Shh, stop it with that.
Thank you for listening to the H&M Trucking Podcast. Please leave a review, subscribe, and connect with Marcus over at the H&M Trucking social media channels. And if you're considering a job at H&M, find us at hmtrucking.com. Until next time, stay safe and ahead of the curve drivers.